My name is Maksim Sadym. I'm a software engineer working for Google, and my main focus is in Chrome automation and specifically in WebDriver BiDi. During this presentation, I'm going to give a short overview of the WebDriver protocol in general and differences between WebDriver Classic and BiDi. I want to show you our shared roadmap and progress on it in the WebDriver BiDi specification. Also, I want to tell you about WebDriver BiDi verification and implementation state. And at the end, I will show you how you can get advantage of WebDriver BiDi using Selenium right now. So let's start with the WebDriver protocol. There are actually two flavors of it, so-called WebDriver Classic and WebDriver BiDi. WebDriver is a protocol allowing testing tools to provide a cross-browser automation API. So without having a browser API, there would be no way to make end-to-end tests at all. And instead, all those end-to-end testing had to be performed manually. And WebDriver allowed to run the same end-to-end tests in different browsers, which is amazing. So now we informally call it WebDriver Classic to distinguish from the WebDriver BiDi, and let me show you what's the difference there. When using WebDriver Classic, your automation tool translates your script into HTTP request over here. Let's assume as an automation tool, you have your Selenium setup, and the browser driver, you have a ChromeDriver. So your automation tool communicate to browser driver via HTTP request, and that browser driver communicates to the browser via internal browser-specific protocol. For example, in Chromium, it's ChromeDriver protocol. So let's say we want to test this web page. What happens next is your automation tool sends this WebDriver Classic HTTP request, and you probably saw those requests when you saw verbose log of Selenium tests. So it sends a session URL post, and it will ask browser driver to navigate somewhere and get some other comments. For example, get element with specific selector data test expressor, and then it gets the sends another request with click on that element. And as long as it's HTTP request, for each of those requests, it gets the response, and only that it goes to the next step. So the problem here is that as long as you cannot get the events sent from browser driver to automation tool, you cannot get the notifications about, let's say, the element appear. And in order to get data, if is espresso loaded, for example, you have to repeat and repeat again and again the same request until it succeeded. So the idea of WebDriver BiDi is to make a new standard protocol for browser automation, which will be based on the bidirectional transport on WebSockets. So here, what it would look like. As you see, the browser driver can communicate to automation tool as well. At the same time, it can not only send several commands, it can listen for events coming from WebDriver, from browser driver. All browser vendors are involved in the specification process, and here are some of them. And I want to underline that without all that collective effort, it simply won't be possible. So why do we work on the WebDriver BiDi? Because Google's mission is to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. And as such, we care a lot about web pages having a good quality, which makes cross-browser tests very relevant. So what does new protocol mean? the protocol should have specification, verification, and implementation. Let's get into the details about that. Specification. All starts from RFC, and you can find the by current draft BiDi specification by that link. And it looks something like this. So there are very specific steps. It's language, something between normal English and programming language. So yeah, if you want to implement WebDriver BiDi, you just have to implement everything described in the specification. We have a roadmap. Recently, we agreed on shared roadmap on which we are going to work. So let's start with the features we already have specification for and have it implemented in Chromium and Firefox. Login of console messages and JavaScript heroes. I'm going to focus on this specific scenario later on, as it can show the main advantages of the BiDi comparing to the classic. This scenario uses script evaluation to extract content on the page. It also includes serialization and deserialization, which is different from WebDriver Classic. It is more precise and more distinguished. It's not just JSON serialization, but a bit more complex structure. I will show it a bit later. This scenario prints a web page as a PDF. You probably heard that sometimes you need to generate the PDF, and you have to use another tool for that. So yeah, it will be in BiDi. It is in BiDi, actually. Capturing screenshots, and it covers not only the current web view, but some sub areas of the page, like Node, or you can even get a full page screenshot. Although it's not finished yet, we are actively working on the following scenarios. In this scenario, mutation observer is installed by a Bootstrap script as early as document gets created. It watches for changes made to the DOM tree and sends relevant updates to the client. The main idea of this is to be able to set up a script which will be run before any page-side scripts and prepare all the necessary things for testing. It can be not only mutation observer, it also can set cookies or anything else. So you'll be able to be the first one who run any script on the page and prepare everything you need. Network events. So the main reason for that, the main usage of it is measuring performance. So this scenario sets up handlers for network events and then navigates to a web page, and the provided timing information from the immediate events could be used to measure the page load performance by storing it in, for example, HRR file, whatever. So this scenario enters text into a form field via keyboard and submits that form via mouse click. Basically, it includes almost all the input emulations, not only mouse and keyboard, but for example, touches and features, etc., and scrolls. So all those kind of emulations. This scenario, it's in queue, but we'll start working on that soon. This scenario allows a web page and uses network request interception to replace any image in the page with custom image. But of course, it's not only about images. It will be about any data you have sent via network. So why it can be needed? For example, if you want to test front end without backend, you can simply intercept all the requests sent from front end and emulate the backend responses. So it would allow you to test front end separately. Load a web page that is protected behind user credentials. Quite straightforward. And register before unload event handler. So this is the roadmap we agreed on across all the contributors, but the order can be changed. As you see, we already implemented the first 4 items, actively working on the next 3, and have another 3 in the queue. So let's talk about next important part of the new protocol. It's verification. What does it mean? We use web platform tests for verification. So basically, anyone who wants to implement WebDriver BiDi can not only read the specification, but can run the very specific tests where, so this is an example of what the test look like. So if you pass all the tests, it means you implement WebDriver BiDi. As you see, here we test serialization, test primitive values, for example. So undefined is serialized like type undefined, or if we get a bit more complex items, so the number is serialized like type number and value some value. So that is what typical WPT test look like. Sometimes it's, of course, a bit more complex. Here you see, as of yesterday, March 29th, 2023, the state of the WPT tests for BiDi across browsers. So we on a good way to implement them, but of course, when we implement a new, when we add new specification, we add new WPT test for that, of course, to be sure that everyone read the specification in the very same way. So let's get to the implementation perspective. I want to show you how we implemented it on Chromium. So you can take a look at the Chromium BiDi CDP mapper by that link. But what we have is we have 2 different ways. For Classic, we have a client. As a client, you connect to the ChromeDriver, and ChromeDriver communicates via CDP to Chromium. CDP is Chrome-specific protocol, Chrome DevTools protocol, and it's bidirectional as well. It works on pipes, and yeah, it looks quite similar to the WebDriver BiDi. But what we have in the BiDi is slightly different. We added additional item called BiDi CDP mapper. So basically, when you as a client ask ChromeDriver to add new, to create new BiDi session, it creates a BiDi CDP mapper in your browser and forward all the BiDi comments from ChromeDriver to that mapper, and then mapper communicates, translates that comments into CDP and communicates to the browser and sending back all the way back around, all the events, BiDi events and comments, results, etc. So why we did it? In order to have more flexibility on the mapper side and in order not to couple it tightly with ChromeDriver. So you probably, if you ever run ChromeDriver with BiDi, you probably saw this tab called BiDi CDP mapper. That's where all the magic actually happening. And if you click that debug information button, you can take a look. You can see all the CDP traffic which is happening, going back and forth, and some other debug information. So if you're curious, yeah, feel free to take a look there. As I mentioned, the CDP mapper is an upstream project for the ChromeDriver, and as such, we have latest ChromeDriver release data on the WPT, and you can take a look at this link. I will share the slides later on. So that's how our current WPT state look like with the latest ChromeDriver release. But our latest BiDi CDP mapper has better pattern rate, and you can take a look at this metric later on. It's because it's upstream. We constantly fixing and working on the mapper, and then upstream it to the ChromeDriver, and then release ChromeDriver with the new version of the mapper. So what is our implementation status look like. We already implemented login of console messages and JavaScript heroes, and we implemented extracting content. We are very close to finish printing to PDF and capturing screenshots. We are quite close to finishing observing changes, which is Bootstrap scripts, basically. And we are actively working on network events to measure page load performance. We didn't forget about other items. We have them in queue. So yeah, please take a look. And if you want more details, you can refer to our blog post or my previous talks about WebDriver BiDi. So let's talk about Selenium and WebDriver BiDi. Let's check which advantages of BiDi you can use right now. Handling browsing contexts. It's about getting child browsing context, open new tab or windows, etc. All those kind of operations you already can do using BiDi. Navigating with wait condition. Finally, we can wait for the specific page load state after navigation. Console log events. Yes, you can listen to console log events. Finally, you don't need to add some add hooks on the JavaScript page in order to store it somewhere and eventually pick them up. So it's out of box. JavaScript logs and JavaScript exceptions as well. So all those functionality is already supported, and our colleagues actively working on async script evaluation, which would allow you to run script which will return after some promise is resolved. For example, you can run script which will be resolved after some element have appeared on the page. So yeah, this is what our current Selenium integration with WebDriver BiDi look like. And I'm going to show you a bit more details of each of these points. So let's start with the handling browsing context. What you can do with them. First of all, you can get 3 for any specific window, and it will get you the 3 of the actual frames. You can open a new window or new tab here. So you create a new tab with that tab, or you can create a new window right here. You can refer to the browsing context using classical window handle, the cross-operable. So here, for example, you can create browsing context, which will be the very same as active driver, active tab. So this get window handle will return you WebDriver classic handle, but it can be used in BiDi. So you don't have to worry about is that BiDi ID, is it classic ID, that things. You can open new tab next to the existing one if you add that magical reference context. You can close the browsing context. So this functionality is partly covered either by CTP or by classic functionality, but please keep in mind that BiDi is a standard, and each browser supporting BiDi will automatically support this functionality. It provides more flexibility, for example, the navigation and readiness state. And you can navigate with the specific readiness state, as I mentioned. For example, if you don't want to wait for anything, you can navigate with wait condition none, or you can wait for the page to become interactive, or wait for the page to become completely load. So what can be done from the events perspective? First, you need to create a log inspector. And after you create log inspector, you can use it. So for example, you can listen to console events, and here in that event handler, the log would be in BiDi serialized format. As I mentioned before, you will have to take a look there, but it's way more precise because you can tell by the there is a dedicated field type on each value, so you can tell specifically what is that. It's more flexible than JSON serialization. So here you can set up listener for JavaScript events, and you can listen to JavaScript exceptions, which can be super useful in case of end-to-end testing. So let's look at the very specific example. So imagine you want to test this web page. It's some coffee shop, and you want to test that. Here we have some buttons with coffee, and you want to check that when you click to this button, you want the sum to be updated. So for example, if I click to espresso, I want to have total number to be updated to $10. So let's assume you already created a driver instance and test harness. So how would you do it in WebDriver Classic way? First, you wait for element to appear using proper selector. Here is by area label. And then you click on that found element. So now we clicked that espresso button, and we want to verify that the sum is updated. You could assert it by getting element and checking its text. Here you could make very same, wait for the element, then get text and verify that the value is $10. But it can lead to a race condition between client-side script updating the text and Selenium getting the element's text. I strongly recommend you avoid using direct assertion in the UI tests whenever possible. I'm quite sure that lots of you faced this problem, so if I would be in the room, I would ask you to raise a hand, those who did face this problem when the element was not updated when you get and updated slightly later, but still, please use wait instead of the direct assertions. And let's run this test we just wrote. Assuming you have a proper test harness, which I omitted in this presentation for the sake of simplicity and readability. So, ta-da! Our test passes, all good. Or not good. So let's check the pages console. Oh no, some additional workflow is broken, as you see here. You already maybe understand what I'm looking for. In this example page, it was added intentionally for the presentation. But what if it was some additional functionality, like collecting users' discount card from cookies, for example, or saving their preferred drink or something else? It can be anything. So, of course, you could test all of those features separately, but let's try to fix this test using BiDi. First, we need to enable BiDi when we create a driver. We simply add options with enable BiDi, and let's assume we already have this test. So what we have to do is to create log inspector, as I mentioned before. Here, as a parameter, you can add specific browsing contexts you want to listen to events from. And after that, you add some event handler, exception listener, which will fail your test. So in case of we get some JavaScript exception, we fail it with this message. But of course, we can add here as a function parameter, we can add any we can add arguments and get the very specific text from the exception and so on. So let's test out the test again. Again, I haven't implemented the in the test. I haven't written the proper harness with proper failing in async way, etc. But you can do it. So we run the test and voila, it failed. And here you see that it's unexpected JavaScript exception. It's exactly what we wrote in the assert fail in the test. So yeah, that's what you already can use in the Selenium WebDriver. So please go ahead and stop struggling with some things like navigation, for example. Yeah, and as a conclusion, I want to show you this table of what is happening. So it's WebDriver BiDi specification, its implementation on Chromium side, and its integration in Selenium. Yeah, our colleagues from Firefox went further with those implementations. So yeah, you can use BiDi with Firefox as well. I guess that's all I wanted to show you. So you can find these slides by this link and all the links. You can find all the links there. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions if you have some. Yeah, thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you very much, Maksim. Let's see if we have any questions in the room. Come on. Anyone? I have a question here. 1 sec.
So the authentication feature you've not started work on or you've got plans to work on, will that help with multi-factor authentication, for instance?
Oh, what a perfect question. I personally haven't started looking at that at all, so I cannot tell you. I assume that yes, we will consider that as well, because it's one of the important modern features.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm coming.
For the functionality to observe changes in the DOM, would that also help with being able to watch animations on elements, knowing when that animation has finished? Such as like a transformation, expanding, collapsing.
Mm-hmm. Good question. I wonder if it's possible to do via Web API. You will be able to make it as well, because you can set the script which will observe that animation. But I am not sure if there is such a Web API.
Okay. Any other question? No? Okay, thank you very much, Maksim. We will conclude here. We will take a short break and then we'll be back in this room afterwards. Thank you.